Hello ladies and gentlemen, how's it going? Screezilla here, and I hope you're all well. And sorry for a little bit of a lack of content these last weeks. Been a little bit ill, if you haven't been following me on Discord. Anyway, we are back, and welcome to the starting guide for the British Ground Forces. Yes, we're going to be looking at the British Ground Forces today. A nation that has it's got its strengths and weaknesses, like so many, but the British it can really show. Now, as always, trying to pick a starting point for tanks is always a hard choice, but hopefully this guide will help you and help you decide on the nation that's going to suit you best, along with the other videos I've made on France, Italy and Japan. So today we're going to be looking at tank warfare for Great Britain. Now, first of all, we will be starting with the British tech tree. A little bit of talk about the British tech tree first. With a rich variety of vehicles, it can all be one of those one of the harder tech trees I find to research, mainly because the British tech tree you do rely a lot on solid armor piercing shells. There's not really anything with a HP shell in there. Sorry, HE shell in there. You don't really have armor piercing high explosive. You don't really have anything with any explosive filler inside, and this can be a bit tricky because obviously there's no boom inside the tank when you penetrate. However, the upside to this is you are able to punch through most armor in game. Any tank that really scares you, even hull down, you're most likely going to be able to go for a few of the weak points on them. The downside, as I say, is you have to be very accurate. Now, in real life, the British armor-piercing shells were highly effective. Let's just quickly look at a German Tiger, for instance. So we'll look at the Tiger 1. And what we'll do is we will grab the armor system and go to protection analysis. We'll go to Britain, like so. And we will go for the Firefly. Let's go for a Sherman Firefly. Now, with the Sherman Firefly, you've got all the armor-piercing shells, and as you can see, you've got very good armor penetration. Now, the 76mm, can't remember the poundage of it, the 76mm gun is extremely strong and capable of going through most things. 17-pounder, there we go. So, for example, if we just go with the Shot Mark 8, it's a ballistic cap, so basically it just has a little bit more point to it. And we could shoot the Tiger even angled. We're going to be able to go through some spots on this Tiger. A bit of a chance in this area here, you know, you have got... It still can be challenging to actually penetrate, but there are areas where you can penetrate on a highly angled Tiger. Whereas with other nations, you will struggle. So there's that beautiful weak spot we wanted to look at. So going through right there, just on the actual sort of corner of the armour, just underneath where it's at its weakest, and you'll see it would just go straight through and would cause an instant kill. However, if we're facing this Tiger front on, if we shoot slightly to the centre here, say, as you can see, not all crew members go down. So you'll need to put a secondary shot in there. And this is where the British guns can be troublesome, because you have to put multiple shots on target. Whereas in real life, of course, when you've got your tank has been penetrated, so let's say we penetrated the Tiger through its turret ring, the crew would bail instantly. They wouldn't stay in there anymore. Even if none of the crew got injured, they would get out of that tank very quickly because they know it's going to get penetrated again. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that in a game, of course, because in a game, your crew don't jump out. You stay in your tank, you stay fighting. So it can really cause some problems for the British tanks and their tech trees. So as always, we're going to start with the reserve tanks. So with the reserve tanks, we've got the Tetrarch and the A13. Now the A13 is a cruiser tank, and what this means is it's basically a light reconnaissance tank. Cruiser tanks were designed to be able to take other vehicles on in a little bit of combat, but mainly they were there to sort of go on reconnaissance missions, get back to town, take lots of notes, things like that. Now, the A-13 Cruiser was a product of the Christie suspension, basically, and the Red Army's BT line of tanks. A British officer saw firsthand the revolutionary design with a large-scale exercise of a platoon of BT 5s, showing the raw speed cross-country of the tank's suspension, giving more operational uses of tanks. Now, up until this point, basically, Christie suspension changed pretty much everything. You'll see bogey wheels on lots of tanks. Just look at the figures here. We've got the bogey wheels, and as you can see, they're just very basic suspension. It just, you've got two wheels doing that. The trouble is, it's not independent suspension. When you have independent suspension, with a Christie suspension for instance, fortunately we can't really see it with the X-ray view, but basically there's a long line heading through the actual tank. It takes up more room inside of a tank, but it gives you better suspension across country. So basically all of these wheels will move up and down, and they'll fill the holes in the ground. So as you're going across country, you're going to be a lot flatter. Now, Morris Motors sent a team to America to buy one of the Walter Christie designed tanks, and a license to build their own version of the suspension, basically. The tank itself, the A13E1 tank, was found to be too cramped, not suitable for the crew, and not really suitable for operational use. And this was Christie's own designed tank. One of the things with the Christie suspension that it can do is you can actually remove the tracks and then use the road wheels as road wheels. And this gave the Christie suspension tanks that had this ability the advantage to go much faster on asphalt road, but also save some fuel mileage. This, however, wasn't great because that road wheel didn't really make things easy, so the British got rid of that and they put on a normal return roller, so just basically a roller with teeth and things like that, and just made it so it can only go on tracks. And so thus the A13 was born, along with a new type of tank for the British, the cruiser tank. Now the cruiser, as I said, was a fast tank able to scout or move to the front line of the formation. It had a lot of good points. One large issue though with the Mark 1 was a rather cramped turret for three men to be crewing, basically. Now you have a four-man crew in the in the A13 Mark 1, and as you can see, it's a very cramped space, so you would not want to be in this thing in a military condition. Now operationally, the A13 suffered against the Panzer IIIs and Panzer IVs. However, the tank thrived once it got to the desert. In the early years, sort of fighting the light German tanks and Italian tanks, before you got the things like the Panzer IIIs and IVs coming into their strengths, the Panzer IIs were quite fair game, and the Italian light tanks as well. This thing was very, very strong, and it didn't have great armor power protection for such a light tank. It used its agility to its advantage. So, as you can see, basically it's very, very lightweight, very small, but the armour is very weak, of only 14mm of armour on the front, which is not great, but it can give you a bit of protection. Now, one last thing on this tank is it was part of Operation Bertram, and in the months leading up to the Second Battle of El Alamein, tanks were dressed up as trucks. Using this cover and using it at night, they would swap parked trucks with parked tanks. So they'd have all the tanks parked to the back and then the trucks parked to the front. And they would basically slowly swap them. So they'd put tanks in there that they thought, basically looked the part, and then made the Germans think that they had more trucks rather than they had tanks. And basically this ended up to the Allies winning because they had more tanks than the Germans expected at the Second Battle of El Alamein. And it was just a very interesting tactic, a very interesting use of this tank, and it is a very good part of its history. Now, in-game, the A13 is a fantastic starting tank. However, the British Reserve tanks don't give you a great idea of how the rest of the British tech tree is going to be. Speed and agility it does start to lack in the mid tiers of the British tanks. You haven't got that real good speed and agility of these early light tanks. It will get you used to using armor-piercing rounds. Now, the armor-piercing rounds have amazing penetration ability. These things can take out Tiger 2s, for instance. You know, this reserve tank can take out a Tiger 2. It can take out a Panther from the side. It's very strong. But the one thing it does lack is post-penetration damage. Because of only having a 40mm gun, the 2-pounder on there, the shell is rather small, so when it goes through, it's only a small bit of shrapneling. You'll want to aim for centre of mass shots if you can, and that's going to give you the best results. The best way to use this vehicle is similar to the Tetrarch, which we'll talk to about next. But basically, you want to move in fast, take a position, take a capture point, find a good position for ambush, and then to ambush your enemy from back or side. You want to basically play this tank as a flanker. Try to get around the side of the enemy. If you can get to a position where you're almost safe and they can't see you, you can take them out at will. You'll do very well in this tank indeed. Now next up, we're going to be looking at the Tetrarch. Now the Tetrarch is an interesting vehicle. In the 1937, the Vickers Armstrong Company were working on a new light tank / cruiser tank to replace the still popular Vickers Mark VI. The Vickers Mark VI was almost a tankette. It was very small. It had I think it had a 7.892 Vickers machine gun on it. What's called Vickers machine gun on it. It was basically just designed to police areas and just keep the peace, basically. These tanks were going to be sort of scouts or for, as I said, use for keeping the peace and policing towns and things like that after capture or if we're advancing. So basically, you just stay behind the enemy lines, keep those tanks there to police the irregulars. So, you know, if a couple of Germans do rise up and try and revolt and rebel, then you've got those little tanks in place to take them out. And they're going to stop things like small arms fire, so you're pretty safe in there from, you know, rifle caliber rounds and stuff like that. Now, the tank was actually never really meant for frontline combat. Originally, the Purda, or the sort of secret name it had for the tank, meaning secrecy, it would have a 15mm Baser machine gun and a 7.62 coaxial. This would be replaced by a quick-firing 2-pounder, the 40mm gun that we have here, along with the Baser coaxial machine gun. And this would become the A-17 Tetrarch, a Roman / Greek word meaning basically the ruler. So in Roman, it was when you had around four sort of towns, then you were a Tetrarch, ruler of that area. Now, the tank itself had, of course, Christie suspension and the reliable Henry Meadows Type 30 12-cylinder engine with around 165 basic horsepower. As with all light tanks, the crew is very, very cramped, meaning the commander needed to multitask. Basically, the commander does everything else in the tank. So if we look in here now, you've got your loader here, you've got your commander here, and then you've got your driver. Now, technically, the commander would actually usually be in the loading position where the gun, whereas you'd have an actual designated gunner. But it's a little bit mixed up in here, but oh well, these things. And of course, the radio station. So the main reason the commander was in the loader position is because he could actually reach the radio a little bit easier. But as you can see, it is a very cramped condition. These vehicles were not very easy to fit into if you were somebody of an average size, and they weren't very comfortable either. The other big downside of this is your crew is very close together, so if you do get penetrated, you're usually going to go down in one shot. You will get used to being taken out in one hit in these things, unfortunately. Now, the Tetrarch's military career was not spectacular, but it was still a very important tank. Be it in the duplex drive, which was basically a ability to make it swim, so it would have a sort of secondary set of usually they would add, I believe it was extra little paddles to the actual tracks, so when it went through water, it would actually push the water behind it, almost like a paddle steamer. And then they'd have big canvas sides going up the side of this vehicle, and because it was so light, it could float and then just swim its way through any leak of water. And this would later go on to put on things like the Cromwell, the Sherman, Um, the Comet, I believe, as well. You know, quite a few tanks actually ended up with this type of drive on them, especially for the landings at D-Day. And speaking about Normandy, this tank was very important as well, as it acted as the tank for the airborne forces. The tank would be loaded up into a glider. Because it was so light and easy to fit, they could just land the glider and then just take the tanks out. And a lot of these tanks were put into action very quickly early on in the invasion of Normandy. And this tank did save a lot of lives and helped a lot of people sort of get around places, things like that. Now, the tank was not really meant for frontline action, as I said, but it was a very good scout tank, reconnaissance tank, and then became a commander tank as well. And it served those purposes perfectly well. It also served with the Russians, with the 151st USSR Tank Brigade, serving alongside the T-26, a role it fit very well with. The Tesseract, although ruled obsolete in 1946, was actually still in active service well into the 1950s with the paratroop regiments, as it was really the only tank that would work for paratroopers because it was so small and light. This was eventually replaced with the M22 Locust in about 1950. So in game, much like the A13, speed is your advantage, cap early and flank. One major difference between the A17 Tesseract and the A13 is your turret. Now a Tesseract itself uses a hand cranked turret. So if we look in here, you can see the turret drive. Basically it's just a little crank, you turn it, you move the turret around. With the A13, it's actually a powered turret. You press a little lever and the turret will spin very quickly. So the A13 has got much better turret rotation speed. So you do have to be aware of that using a Tesseract. It is a very slow turret rotation speed. The trouble remains with the armour as well. It is still very light. You're going to have a lot of things penetrating you with it. You do have somewhat protection at long range, but it is very limited. As you can see, you know, you're looking at about 16 to 20 millimeters of armour in most places, and this isn't enough to stop most things. It will stop some light arm fire, small arms fire, 30 caliber machine gun bullets. It will stop at long ranges, but that's about it. The other thing it has in common with the A13 is it has a terrible reverse speed, and this is something you're going to have to get used to playing British tanks, is they don't reverse well. The reverse build is a problem for many tanks, and it doesn't get much better until you finally reach things like the Centurion down here at rank 4. So, the British tech tree, well, generally always use solid shot shells, so you're going to be using AP and APDS and things like that. The rank 2 to 3 tanks can be hard to use. They generally have a good, although flat, pieces of armour on them. If we look at things like the Churchill, for instance, we'll look at the last later model. The armour is very flat, as you can see. It's very thick armour, 152 millimeters thick, and if you want to have a look at how thick that is that thick. It's a very thick piece of armour. It's very hard to penetrate these things, but because it is flat, it doesn't make it hard for things to go through. A lot of things will be able to penetrate you. So this is a problem with a lot of British tanks, is they have very flat armour, so it can be very problematic. The other thing, as I said, is the actual guns. Because you have solid shot shells, they aren't very good at post-penetration, because they lack an explosive filler. They'll go through a tank, but they won't really cause much damage inside. The anti-aircraft line as well is pretty mediocre. The Crusader Mark II AAA is actually very good. The Falcon can be okay. But I've not yet tried the Chieftain and Marksman, but considering what it is, I know what it is because I've got the Japanese variant basically. It's a decent AAA vehicle and it has got radar on it. As you get up through the tiers, of course, the tank destroyer tier line can be somewhat frustrating sometimes. You do get interesting things like the Archer, for instance, which is a tank that drives backwards. There are some interesting vehicles, and you have got a lot of heavy tanks in here as well, but they do all lack mobility. It's not until you get to things like the Chieftains and Centurions in somewhat you start to get really good MBTs. The Centurion was really the first MBT to be made, the first main battle tank, and it is very good. The counterpart, the 4002 is also extremely good. Things like the Vickers MBT is a fantastic tank because it's got such a good rate of fire. So there are some really good gems in this tech tree. Okay, well, we're going to take them out for one battle, obviously. So we'll take them out for a quick match, and we'll see how well we go. And here we are on Poland, so let's jump in, and we're going to take out the A13 first of all. Probably took a bit too much ammo there. Oh well. So, as you can see, we've got a good little bit of speed here. So, we're with the American and Japanese, it looks like, yep. A couple of Daimler armoured cars. Tesseract just there. So, as you can see, the cruiser tank is designed to go really fast across country. And as you can sort of see with the suspension, the Christie suspension works perfectly. You can just sort of see it bobbling up and down as you go through things, and it just helps you get a little bit more speed up, just keeps you moving, just keeps the momentum going. Now, obviously with this kind of match, we're going to have enemies quite early towards the cap point, and it's going to be Russian tanks as well, so I expect some BTs and things like that. Unfortunately, we've got the sun in our eyes as well, so that's not going to be very helpful towards us. So let's see what we can do here. Bit of a awkward position here. See, there's a tank just down the road. Let's take out the commander. Transmission and driver. And dead. Okay, that's one tank dead. So as you can see, fucking idiot. Dude, seriously, bugger off, you idiot. You bloody idiot. God's sake. I swear some people are just dropped on their head at birth. So now I've got to just manoeuvre a bit to try and actually be able to get back to the in fighting position. Okay, that's dead. Back there, take that loader. Tracks hit. Can't see, we're going to pull back. We've got artillery fire incoming. So basically this is a good way of playing this tank, is just sort of popping out of cover and just keeping it somewhere sort of somewhat safe. Now we're in a bit of an awkward spot now because one, artillery's incoming, and two, surprised we die there. Two, we've now been spotted due to that artillery barrage. So we're just going to loader, take that loader again. There we go, finally take them out. We've got damage. Our transmission's gone. Somebody behind us, possibly. Not sure what took out the transmission there. There's a tank dead front there. Go, managed to take him out. Okay, that's a good move. There's a tank. There's a AAA vehicle moving there. No, it's not. It's an actual big gunned bugger. We're just repairing though. PSU's dead. Is that tank down industry or is that something else? Right, okay, so we're gonna have to try and move forwards now. So we've got a bit of damage, but we're not too bad. Things are not doing too poorly. I'm just gonna want to try and do a creeping barrage almost. Now, as you did see, we did manage to take a few shots and survive that time round, which is a good thing. But you will have to do multiple shots on target, as you can see, and it can be frustrating if you just don't get that kill instantly, because you can really struggle. There's somebody to the left of us, I think, doing that. So anyway, the British Tech Tree. Good luck on starting it. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Comment, subscribe, all of those usual things. And I will see you all next time. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Proof I have a script. I'm just terrible at reading it.